Well, Leach, it's showtime.
Hey, Steve, I'm ready.
You're you're live. I'm
Live.
live. Everybody's live. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour. How was your week,
So
brother?
far, so good. It's been a great week. Did a little teaching already this week, which I always love. And ready for the show. We got a fun show today, I think.
A fun show with an intro. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour with Will Leach. He wears a leather jacket. He might carry a knife. I don't know. But he doesn't carry a clipboard. Today's topic, unleashing the power of emotion to create big deal ads.
That's right.
I'm Steve Brown. I'm the co-host here. I'm just tagging along. I get to hang out with Will every week. It's kind of like I tell people, I'm the smartest guy in marketing. Well, how can you say that, Steve? Well, I hang out with Will Leach every week.
Then they shut their mouths.
And they do. Their mouths they can't believe what I say. And everyone that listens to this is in the same boat with me. Will, tell us a little bit about this topic. What's the backstory on emotions? Did you tear up this week? What's going on?
No, I actually didn't, but I was actually reminiscing with a friend of mine back in my days at Pepsi. And we're talking a little bit about kind of what's been happening the last decade and the companies I've been working with. And I think sometimes when you work at a really large company, they look at people like us, Steve, and they're like, man, you're so lucky. You get to work with all these different brands and these different topics. And they may look at, soda for 3 decades, right?
Mhm.
So anyways, it was I was talking a little bit about that, and we're talking about how I use the principles that I learned decades ago, I guess, plus all the behavioral science stuff to help my clients now. And we were talking about that. I said, you know what? I wonder if today I shouldn't give like a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, of what these big companies know. And that's why I kind of came up with this idea of let's talk about emotion and how these biggest companies in the world think about emotion and how they use emotion in their creative. And I'm going to show you that it's a little bit more sophisticated, but yet really, really simple than you may think. So I just kind of came up with it after talking to my buddy.
Well, that's an excellent idea because everybody wonders what they do. I imagine these armies of people sitting around this big, giant conference table, maybe 50 people, all this mind power on this one challenge of getting this sugared water with a caramel color to
Yep.
sell more than my other guy with sugared water and caramel color.
Yep.
There's a lot to it. There's big money.
There is big money, but some of the principles that they use, and they've spent millions and millions of dollars over decades of learning what makes marketing work, what makes marketing creative win awards, what makes it memorable. It comes down to just a few little simple principles, and that's what we'll share today.
See, that's what I'm saying. Few little simple principles. Let those big companies hire all those expensive armies of people.
Mhm.
When you, as an agency, can go read Marketing the Mind States and you can apply the principles in this book to give you this big giant lever to serve your clients with behavioral science based insights on their content. I was writing one size fits all content for my clients, and I was following the Story Brand framework. It was a huge lift by putting on the Story Brand framework glasses.
Yeah.
Big upgrade. But when I learned about mind state marketing, and then I could have states of mind flavored, then all of a sudden went from one size fits all, which is way better than what the competitors were doing, to mind state marketing, which was like dialed in huge. So these few little things can actually, if all those 50 people sat around that desk and read mind state marketing,
We could get it down. We could. That's right. We didn't need to have the 50 people. That's right. So no, it's a really good way, guys, of thinking about the words you use and the visuals. Where I think StoryBrand does a great job with structure. And we're going to talk about a little bit about structure of stories today. But you want to get down to, okay, so what do I write? And that's where this stuff comes into play.
emotion starts with emotion. Now I'm gonna can I just mess up your intro for this? Is that all right
Sure.
for the
Let's go.
emotion? So when people do in the story brand framework, there's these three our hero, which is our client, our customers. They have these challenges. There's an obvious challenge. I need to buy a soda because I'm thirsty.
Mhm.
But then there's an internal challenge to this. I want to pick the right one because maybe I don't want to gain weight. Maybe I'm concerned about my health. So I'm kind of being hard on myself that I'm going to have this secret thing and splurge and get a soda, right?
Mhm.
So that's the internal challenge, and it's tied to emotions.
Mhm.
And that's where, if you can dial that in, it's the big competitive advantage. If you can just sink your teeth into the emotions your prospect is in that moment, it's huge. It starts
It,
with emotion. I'm almost tearing up. That's how emotional I am about this.
so it is, and I think I think that in the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years, most agencies, most people out there know that emotion is important. If you don't know that motion is important, this is probably, you're behind the curve. I mean, like, and that wasn't always the case. You know how it was, like, back in the 70s and the 80s, you didn't talk about really emotions a lot. Maybe some of your most impressive creative did. It wasn't really a part of the vernacular. Well, now emotion, we all know emotion is important, but what I want to do is stress this to you guys. I think sometimes we think that emotion is kind of like, super unleaded versus unleaded. And so your unleaded commercial, if you just put some emotion into it, it'll make it super unleaded, and you get a turbo boost to your creative. I'm telling you, that is a superficial way of thinking about emotion. What you should be thinking about emotion is this: it gives gas versus no gas. If you don't have emotion in your creative, and I don't care if you tell me, well, this is just a print ad, Will, or this is just a 5-second digital spot. If you don't have emotion in that, there will be no action. Why do I know that so confidently? There's a guy by the name of Antonio Damasio. I don't know. Have you ever heard of Antonio Damasio? He's
No,
a kind of a big deal in my sciences.
Antonio Banderas. I got that one, but not Damas.
They're similar looking, right? So Antonio Damasio, neuroscientist, and he did a bunch of research, and I'm going to simplify what he did. He basically studied people that had brain damage in accidents, things like that, but specifically he looked at people that had brain or damage to areas of the brain that controlled emotion. And what he found is that these people have had brain damage in the emotional parts of their brain. They're just like you and I, Steve. They look the same, they talk the same, everything seems very normal except for one critical thing: they can't make decisions. Meaning they would look at a menu and look at like three options on a menu, and they literally could not make a decision. And so they would just keep going through all this options again and again and again. And the big takeaway, and this is all published research, is that emotions will actually get people to take an action. That's why you need emotion. It's not about getting my creative more emotional so they'll take more action. It is, if you don't have emotion in your creative, they will not take action. So that it all starts with emotion. It's critical to get this right.
No emotion, no action. That's a Will Leach.
Very simple.
Excellent. So the emotion should feel like it connects with an understanding. I should feel understood by you if you're connecting with my emotions. Sometimes I think the folks that are designing marketing have that brain damage that you were talking about.
It could be. It
That
doesn't make any sense. I'm with you. I'm with
they
you.
have no empathy.
It's true. And then we've talked about this. When you get, sometimes you have, um, you know, somebody who's just out of school working on a campaign, they're maybe 19 or 20 and they're doing ads for multivitamins for people in their 60s. I don't care how many books you read or how they can kind of, imagine the world of somebody who's in their 60s or 70s. They just can't, guys. And here's why. It's because that they are doing a superficial form of empathy. And we always say you got to walk in the shoes of your customer. And what I would tell you is that that's great. It's important. And the reason why it's really important, I shouldn't downplay it. It is important because eventually you're going to want to understand the rules that they have, the words that they use. All this stuff matters. I think the issue is that sometimes we just try to do this by doing a piece of research, or day in the life. We'll look at diaries and things like that. And what those things get you is a nice superficial understanding of your customer. But what I want to do is talk to you about being very specific. And if your research is just doing day in the life, if you're just doing personas, if you're just kind of looking at quotes from your social media accounts to really try to understand it, trying to understand, kind of this empathy and create empathy, it's going to take you a long, long time to where you get to a point in your life where you really understand your customer so well that you can write for them perfectly. So let me just cut out 20 years of empathy for you and give you 3 things specifically you want to capture. You can do this through marketing research. You can do this through looking at social media. So it's not about collecting the information and walking in people's shoes differently. It's about what to focus on when you're in their shoes, when you're doing research, when you're talking to your customers. What are the 3 things you need to know? First thing you want to do is, what are their desires, right? Because remember, we just talked about emotion. And if you don't understand somebody's desires, meaning what emotion do they want to feel? Do they want to feel safe, Steve? Or do they want to feel confident? Or do they want to feel in control, right? So emotions matter. So you better understand that one desire that they have for you and your brand. Second thing you want to do is, what do they value in the moment? Like, what do they value? What's important to them for that soda? You just actually, in your example, right? Is it to lose a little bit of weight? Is it to make me feel like I'm healthy? Maybe it's to be a little bit sinful, and maybe it's to have a nice treat. So you better understand what they desire. So think about, what do they desire? What do they desire? What do they desire? What do they desire? What do they value in that moment? What do they value in the moment? And the third thing is beliefs. And all beliefs are accepted truths that we have in life. So you want to read all this stuff and figure out, what beliefs do they have? And when you understand literally just what their motivation or their desire is, what they value in that moment that they're going to make a decision, and what their beliefs are, you have pretty much everything you need to do to create a story, an effective story. And we're going to talk, about stories here in a second, because that's what we love to do on the show.
Here's a good question on this topic. Can you overdo it with emotion?
Oh, wow. That's a great, Bill, I think you are a B2B. Correct me if I'm wrong. You do B2B work, I think. And if that's the case, you can overdo it on emotion. Let me give you an example that comes to mind really quickly. Remember those commercials with Sarah McLachlan with the right? I will remember you. And they show those sad little dogs, Steve. It's the saddest commercial. It's a joke now, because I wish we had the data, but how many people, and I've been in my house and I've turned off that commercial immediately. That is an example of too much emotion. Bill, for you, I think that there is a point where having too much emotion, especially in B2B, can be a point where in the B2B relationship, some people don't want to feel, there you go, I thought so. Some people don't want to feel so much emotion, feel a bit manipulative, but I don't know where that line is. I can tell you, Sarah McLachlan in those commercials totally overstepped the line, right? It's a joke now. You have to figure out where that line is, but yes, too much emotion can hurt. More importantly is getting the right emotion. That is so critical.
What I noticed, she was AWOL when that story came out about Fauci and the beagles. You know how they were doing all this, they were doing these animal tests on beagles. It was an awful story.
Wow, I didn't hear about this. Quiet,
she didn't. She was quiet. She didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Fauci.
There you go.
See, she did overdo that emotion to the point that you don't take her seriously.
Yeah, no,
right?
You can't. I think even she makes a joke of it a little bit too. So that was an example of when it can get really bad.
All right, so we need, I think this ties into with Bill's question as well. If your empathy is insincere, then you overdid it on the emotion. It's just manipulation. But if you're demonstrating a great understanding of what the person's wanting to resolve in their emotional side of their life, then it means you really get them. And that's why they trust you.
And I'll give you an example, a real life example that I used in my company for years now. So I do marketing research. One of my companies does a lot of marketing research for these large brands. And we like to say things like, we want to provide our customers with the greatest insights possible so they can deliver great value. But that's all crap. If I really empathize with my customer, my real customer, what I used to tell us, my team, our job is to do anything we can to let this guy or girl go home at 5 o'clock so they can watch their kid play t-ball. That was our goal. So if I could write an email on behalf of my client so that she could send that email to her boss, that I empathize with her. She just wanted to get home. And so what would I do is like, I'm going to craft up your email. I'm going to send it to you. All you have to do is cut and paste it into your email thing, send it over to your boss. Those little things matter. We create a relationship there because I understood her story, and her story was not to create economic value for her company. Her story was about, how can I get out quickly and be the mom that I want to be? That's a great example of empathy.
Awesome. So nice segue on the stories. Use storytelling in your creative.
Imagine that. So, so guys, and we've talked about this and we talked about this in many shows. The best way to evoke emotion is through story. It's the very best way. There are other ways you can do it. I can scare you. I can absolutely throw a spider at you and scare you, and there's not a big story around there. But those emotions are not often great at all. They don't really last. So the best way to evoke emotion is use storytelling in your creative. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And the way you can do this is, there's lots of different story structures. There's things like the hero's journey, and then there's, of course, the 3-act structure, whatever. We can talk about those in a minute. But really what you want to do, if you want to say, okay, so tell me about the story. What do I have to do about the story? All stories have this going for them. One, they have something called contextual narrative. And really what that is just what is going on behind the scenes. So you have to set context in any story. Any story has context. So you have to figure that out. For your customer, what's the context? And we call that contextual narratives, right? And the idea is you may ask your customer, and let's say if you're a car manufacturer, we've worked with car manufacturers, you would say, to understand the context of what's going on in somebody's life so you can build that empathy, so you can build that story, you say, what led you to buy a car today? And there's going to be this story. It's not going to be so specific to what I'm looking for. I didn't ask that. I just said, what made you come in for a car today? And I think, remember we had the gentleman a couple weeks ago who said that he came into the car dealership, and then the salesman immediately was like, oh, let me tell you about these cars. I saw you looking at this car. Let me tell you about the engine or whatever. But the salesman person never asked why he was in there. Remember, he was buying the car for his daughter. You remember that? I think I wasn't Chip. Anyways, I forgot who the guess was. That's an example of understanding context, understanding what's going on behind the scenes. Then if you understand that with your customer, if you really build that empathy around what's happening in their life, for me, I just told you, for me, it was my clients want to get out at 5 o'clock because they're more than just clients. They are human beings who have families that they want to be and have these joyous experiences. I understand that about my clients. But then the next one you want to do is understand the character, the depth of what the person, right? That's what we're going to have to do to build a story. All stories have a character and they have some sort of context, really basic stuff, right? So to understand the behavioral narrative, you're going to ask like something like, well, tell me about your story. Like, when's the last time you bought a car from me? Or you want to talk specifically, what are you looking for? That's what's called behavioral narratives. Ultimately, guys, it comes down to this. You got to set the context. You have to understand the context of your customer and what's going on in their life. And then their journey, like what are they trying to accomplish? If you understand those two things really deeply, you're going to be able to do much better award-winning creative.
So, all right, let's brainstorm with me.
Yep.
So let's say we're in insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, some people might argue it's a very unsexy business. People don't life insurance. We don't want to talk about that. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's help me understand. Let's pretend I'm in life insurance. Help me understand my character and the context of what's going on.
So first thing, if I was trying to sell this to you, mm-hmm. I would start asking you questions like, well, tell me what's going on in your life. Why are you even considering life insurance? What would you say?
Well, I don't know. I've got a doctor appointment coming up here next month. I'm kind of concerned about it, and I've started to think about my family. Okay. What if something goes amiss? So that's what I'm thinking.
Tell me a little bit more about your family. Do you have a lot of kids or that you're thinking about as well? Is it just a
Yeah,
spouse?
17 kids. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It sounds like, if something was to happen, then those 17 kids may need some support that they would no longer have if something was happened. Is that right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
They kind of like you, Will, too. So
Yeah. All right. Good. Well, I'm not marrying you for you to take care of your kids, guy. All right. So I want you out of my office. So I'm just trying to I'm trying to understand the context, right?
right, right.
You have a doctor's appointment. You're probably getting a little bit fearful. You have this idea that you have these 17 kids, and supporting those 17 kids is going to be really important to you. So I start to understand the little dynamics. I could keep taking that a little bit deeper.
Hmm.
Next up, what I want to do is say specifically, tell me about, you're in here for some life insurance. Tell me how much life insurance you're looking for and why. What's that number look like to you?
Well, I don't have a clue on what that number should look like, right? And
Mhm.
so I have a budget, but I'm just thinking of like, what's it going to be? Will they be able to go to school?
Yeah.
Will my spouse be able to pay the house payment for them to live in? Will things continue on instead of upset their
Love.
worlds?
Yeah, what you just told me there, Steve, told me a lot more about the emotions that you have. One, you have fear, a little bit of fear of, can you afford the insurance that's going to help them maintain their lifestyle over the long term? You've also talked about maybe a little bit of confusion because you don't really know what to ask for, right? You just know you have a budget. One thing that you didn't ask for, which I would tell you now because I want to understand your journey, is rather than saying, "Well, how much can you afford?" I would probably try to say, well, let me tell you about on the average what it's going to take to get your 17 kids to a place of financial, security where you can rest assured that they're going to be taken care of. If I just took those three facts right there and then repeated those to you, you would feel much more kind of
Mhm.
and creative, right? You would feel like, oh gosh, this guy understands me. He understands the total situation I'm in, and he understands emotionally how important it is for me to feel secure, to feel confident, and to feel assured that I have enough coverage to, protect from or to provide for my family.
Yeah, you didn't lead with, "Hey, well, you're in luck. We have a special on this plan, and my company's been around for 30 years, and we've insured lots of people like you, and we're here forever."
Yep, that is one of the hardest things to do as a marketer is not talk about yourself, but is the most important thing for you to learn as a marketer is to not talk about yourself until much later. Much later. You got to build that empathy and build that connection with your customer. And you only do that by understanding their story and recreating that story for them in
Yeah,
your advertising.
yeah, excellent. So perfect there. You just tied in the emotional journey. You started to focus on the benefits, not the features.
That's
Good.
right. Like just like you had said, right? Where the story is never about the tool. It is
Mhm.
always about what the tool does for you or what that tool represents. And I have a really bad example that came to mind just now. One of the best stories ever, what I always think of it is because I grew up in the 80s, it would be the whole Star Wars, all those films, specifically Star Wars, the one I grew up on, right? With the Death Star. And the story of the Death Star, we didn't have to understand the technical dynamics of the Death Star and how big it was and how it operated as a mechanical thing. It was a tool that the Empire was using that represented pure power and kind of conformity
Mhm.
and align, making sure everybody was fearful of this. So they didn't have to focus so much on the tool. The tool represented the Empire's ability to dominate. So what I want you to think about is stop talking about your tools. And I've done this. In fact, I've done this on my master class, which we're changing because I built this tool, Steve. I love my tools. I love my little master class. I love my innovation. I want to talk about it's 12 hours worth of videos for you. It's going to be 14 modules. Each module contains three or four downloads. And you want to talk about your things, your features, your tools. And you don't care. Nobody cares about tools and nobody cares about my features. Nobody cares about my 12 hours worth of video, except for it sounds pretty intimidating. I have to read 12, I have to watch 12 hours worth of videos. So when I get caught up into it. I was looking at it the other day saying, I am talking about my tools versus what these tools do for my customers. And so rather than talking about the 12 hours of videos, what I can talk about is how we're going to help you understand how can you understand beliefs that people have about your brand and how do you overcome any intuitive or I'm sorry, belief systems that are hurting your brand, and so that it feels more natural. That feels like, oh, yeah, that's something I want to do. Nobody wants 12 hours of videos. Nobody wants nacho cheese on any, well, it's hard to say that it's nacho cheese tastes really good. But really what they want is they want to have this amazing, taste in their mouth and have this enjoyable time with their friends. And Doritos happen to be a part of that. And so that's the way you're going to be a part of it. So focus on benefits, not your features. Really, you don't want to talk about your features until somebody in their story is thinking, this sounds good, but I'm a little bit scared. How do I know that you can give me these benefits? That's because I have 12 hours worth of videos. That's because I have nacho cheese flavoring on this Dorito. That's when features become important. But if you sell on features, you're never going to have that emotional, award-winning creative that you want.
So if we're going to recreate their exact emotional journey, these folks that go through your class, help me see it.
Yep. So as we had said, there's a lot of different story structures out there. I'm not going to talk about all the story structures. We already know that there's the hero's journey. We have brand story that Don Miller made famous. We had the 3-act structure. We've got Freytag's pyramid, for instance. There's lots of different ways you can structure a story. Let's get rid of all the crap and just think about, if you want the easiest story ever for any of your creative, do 3 things. First is you have to have some sort of a setup. After that, you have to have some sort of a confrontation. And then third, a resolution. That's it. Setup, confrontation, resolution. I just worked on an ad for I can say the name of it, Rejuvenate. So Rejuvenate is floor cleaning, floor polishing, conditioner, stuff like that. They compete against Swiffer, things like that. So they're asking me, how you keep talking about these emotions, and how do we do that in I'm going to guess a 6-second digital ad, 6 seconds. So I can't do story brand in that amount of time, Steve. I just don't have the time. I can't talk about the character, and I can't talk about that. But what I can do is do a setup, a confrontation, and resolution. So here's what we did. This setup was showing a floor that had scratches and toys all over it. That was a little bit of context, the setup, and then some copy. I'm gonna paraphrase a copy, but it was thinking something like, ready for the dinner party. So that was the setup. Then you saw the confrontation. There's scrapes on the floor. There's toys that looked like, maybe some Matchbox cars were there. And all of a sudden, a resolution, a little Rejuvenate mop goes across that wood floor, and all of a sudden, ding, the little stars. That was my star impersonation there, Steve. Ding. And all of a sudden, there was resolution. That was a 6-second ad, one piece of copy, and then all of a sudden the brand shot up in there. And I was like, oh my gosh, we just had setup, confrontation, resolution, brand. That brought in emotions that probably, if I'm looking at this, and we've all been there, we have company over and the kids have created this horrible mess in the house, and we want to be seen as perfect moms or perfect dads. So what do? We go around, we hide stuff, we throw blankets into closets, things like that. It had all the components needed for a really compelling story that we all have in our minds, and they were able to do it in 6 seconds. That's why story is so important. You don't tell me you can't do this on a 30-second ad. That's not true. I can do it in a 6-second ad. I can do it on a piece of print. The best ad we ever created, I just love it from a behavioral science perspective, was an ad that we did for a pet food manufacturer. And all it was a cool little dog. It was like a Springer Spaniel, and it was jumping up, and it was a yellow background, and the dog was jumping. There's a little treat above its head, and it just said, "Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom." And all that, if you're a pet owner, you know exactly what that is. Like, the treat was coming from the mom, the pet parent, who looks at that animal just like its child. And then there was a sense of like nurturance. There was love there because the dog is saying, "Thanks, Mom." So there's a sense of relationship, and the dog is so excited, and the energy, and you can see the whole dog in the screen. It's trying to grab this little treat. And I was like, I could do that with 2 words and 1 picture. So stories, as much as it's hard, a lot of people tell us we can't possibly do an entire story in a 30-second ad. I beg to differ. You can do it. Good creatives understand that the story is built in the person's head. You have to find a way to pull that whole story out very succinctly. And in this case, it was 1 dog, 1 treat, 2 words.
As you were telling that story about the floor.
Yeah.
So this past week, for whatever reason, my parents needed to go to my brother's house. And my brother was saying, okay, they can come on this day. And the reason he was saying on this day is because he needed to clean up all the mess. Okay. Now, why did he want that mess cleaned up before his parents got there?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So there was the problem.
Yep.
There was the agitation. The problem is parents are coming. My house is a mess. The agitation is I want to appear as a good son.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that they don't worry about me.
Mm-hmm.
That's his emotion.
Yep.
Solution.
Resolution, come later. Can't come on this day. Yeah.
Right.
Come later. That's my resolution.
I'm buying time, right?
Yeah.
So because this solution, it's going to take a long time. So that the product could have popped in there and got it done in minutes instead of needing a whole day.
That's right. Every commercial you see, I think, follows this. Like I was thinking the Swiffer, because the reason why I came out, I saw a Swiffer commercial, and the Swiffer commercial has the same idea. The context, you always see the young stay-at-home mom, or maybe she came home from work and she's looking at the house and there's dust all over. That's the context. The confrontation is they always sweep their finger and there's all this dust, or like you see the dust coming off the TV, and all of a sudden the resolution is a Swiffer sweeper all across, and then ding, and she gets back to her day. It's on mop commercials. It's everywhere. Context, or the setup, confrontation, and then resolution. Now, to do that right, there are lots of ways of doing that right, but you can use StoryBrand to do that, whatever. My point is, if you understand your desires of your customer, if you build that real deep empathy, you're focusing on your benefits and not your features. You're not talking about our mop holds 4 liters of, Swiffer didn't have to do anything of that. They don't have to do anything like that. You tell it in a story, you create an advertisement that is incredibly impactful, and it's award-winning.
And that story, the resolution is not picking up the dust. Mm-hmm. The resolution is I don't feel like a bad homemaker because my place is dusty.
And you know that confidence, I can just see the commercial right now. She looks confident. She looks around the room and she smiles, and you have that kind of chest pumping moment because that's right. I'm the good wife. I'm the good husband that has a clean house like your brother. So that when your parents come over, you don't have to worry about me. Look at this amazing house. That's the resolution. That's right. Yeah.
All right. So great show here. Bill's popping in again here with so similar to a great comedian on stage. That's us. We're comedians on a stage here.
It is. Yeah, that's very, very much so.
It's real life, though.
It is.
Okay?
It really is.
Okay, so it's time when we get to play a little music, maybe ask a little questions, and watch our favorite scientist dance. All right. So how do you currently collect feedback from your customers?
I do it in 2 ways. I do formal and informal. My formal feedback is if you take my masterclass, there's a customer satisfaction study at the very end of it, which I want. And then what I also do is I look at reviews. Like for my Amazon book, I look at my Amazon reviews, reviews on websites, things like that. So those are my formal. My informal I like, and I think is even probably more important, would be repeat purchases. So if I have a client who's asking me for more and more proposals, that's a good sign. I'm collecting good feedback, like good things are happening. And LinkedIn requests after I do a presentation on stage, or if I do like a webinar, when I get LinkedIn requests, the number of LinkedIn requests I receive afterwards is a good indication that it went well. So those are informal ways I do it.
And so I imagine there's a component of that is how do you measure the success of your marketing campaigns?
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many ways to answer this. You should be tracking a change in behavior. A change in behavior only. Not only, but that's number one, right? Don't worry about awards. Don't worry about awareness. Don't worry about that stuff. You want to know open rates, click-through rates, purchases. That's the kind of stuff you want to worry about. You don't want to worry about awareness and top of mind, anything else, right? If you focus on the behavior, that's the best way to know whether or not your creative is working or not.
Excellent show, Will Leach. Hey, it's the Will Leach, what do they call it? A mic drop quote. Okay, sponsored by GrowthStackCRM.com. No emotion equals no action. That's so true. If you wonder why folks aren't moving, it's because you didn't resolve that emotional challenge in there. in sales, I used to think like, "Well, why didn't they buy? Everything logically was aligned. It's going to do this. It was going to do that." I pointed it out, reviewed it a bunch of times, but they still didn't buy. What was the unknown thing in there? There was an emotional component that I didn't address and resolve.
Resolve. I love that. Yeah, because you can have emotion, but if it doesn't resolve some sort of a barrier, then it's great. You put some emotion in there, but it wasn't enough or wasn't the right emotion. So no emotion, no action.
It was all my emotion, not my customer's emotion, right?
Yeah.
That's the mic drop moment, sponsored by growthstackcrm.com. Sounds like we're at a ice hockey game, huh?
That's right.
Will, if folks want you to look over their shoulders on what they're doing with their marketing, their messaging, what do you recommend?
Yep. I would recommend you going to the mindstategroup.com. It's actually called mindstategroup.com. So take a look at mindstategroup.com. Go to the website, connect with me. We can set up a quick appointment or just send me an email. There's a place for you to do it. Just go follow the red boxes. You can connect with me via email, and I would be happy to talk to you about your marketing and how we can use behavioral science to really make a deep emotional connection with your customers and grow your business.
And buy his book. It's a great book. Many copies are sold every month. That's the truth. And it really up-leveled our agency for sure. So if you got an agency, you need a competitive advantage. This book, what's it called? Marketing the Mind States by Will Leach.
Right.
Get it, read it, reach out to Will. He's approachable. He's around.
Even with a leather jacket.
That's right. He'll meet you. He'll meet you at a restaurant. And it's a funny thing. He always asks, no matter what the kind of restaurant it is, what's your chili recipe?
That's right.
All right. We're rolling out here with this nice outro. You know that this is a podcast that you can listen to while you drive, while you work in the yard, while you ride your bike, on all your favorite podcast channels. But if you like to watch, it's on YouTube as well. Send it to your folks that you think about that would love to know about this particular show. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Mindstate Marketing Hour. I'm Steve Brown, your co-host. Will Leach, any last word before I hit end broadcast?
We are good to go. Get emotional, everybody. Go win some awards. Go drive your business.
In broadcast. So my money